Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our event. Ranked Choice Voting is coming to Washington. We'll be featuring Andrew Yang and having a fun conversation in just a little while. We're going to give things just one more minute to make sure that everyone can get here. But thank you so much for coming in. If you're just joining us, thank you for coming to our event. Ranked Choice Voting is coming to Washington, featuring Andrew Yang. We're giving folks just another couple minutes to hop on, and then we'll get going here very shortly. So you don't just have to stare at me. I guess I'll turn off my camera for just another minute. Okay, folks, we're still going to give it one more minute, but we're putting a link in the chat so that you can help us decide on our Animal Mascot Council today. You're going to be learning a bit about these candidates a little bit later, but if you want to go ahead and vote now in the next minute before we start, you can get that out of the way. Jessica has really helpfully put the link into the chat. So if you want to go ahead and vote now, that would be great. And otherwise, we'll get going in just one more minute. So if you're just getting here, we're just about to start. If you want to help us decide on our Animal Mascot Council, there's a link in the chat that Jessica will paste for you. You can learn a bit about the candidates here, and we'll talk a bit more about them in the presentation. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for being here. We've got over 100 folks here today, so we're really happy to have you all joining us to our event. Ranked Choice Voting is coming to Washington, featuring Andrew Yang. So there's going to be an election happening in just a little while. There's a link in the chat if you want to help us decide on our Animal Mascot Council, and we'll talk a bit about what that looks like in a little while. But to get us started here, thought we'd share a little agenda about what we're going to be doing today. So throughout the event, we're going to be holding this election. So if you haven't voted yet, the polls are still open. Go ahead and go to the link and vote for the Animal Council. But alongside doing that, we're also going to give you a little sneak peek at our upcoming plans for the next few years. We're going to have our conversation with Andrew Yang, and then we are going to share questions from you all in the audience. So before we talk too much about our sneaky plans, we want to talk a little bit about the candidates running for our Animal Council today. So we've got meerkats, Meerkats make decisions through consensus. They're very much pack herd animals that work and live together and are all about working better together than any one meerkat can work alone. Alpaca value diversity. They really get along well with others. So that is a strong strength. Giraffes, in addition to having really long necks, you may not know, actually have big ears, which mean they're really good at listening to voters and their constituents. Coyotes are survivors. They'll thrive in virtually any situation. And so they're really adaptable to both crises and good times. Owls are obviously very wise and the personification of wisdom and intelligence and being thoughtful. And finally, we've got turtles. They're maybe not the most flashy, they're maybe not the most quick, but as you know, they get the job done. So that is our slate of candidates. And so we're going to keep letting folks vote for a little while we talk a bit about what's coming up next for FairVote Washington. And before we do that, I want to give you just a little bit of context for how we got here. So FairVote Washington started formally in December of 2016 in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. There was about 15 people there, maybe closer to 20. And we've come a long ways. But not only has FairVote Washington come a long ways, but ranked choice voting has also come really long ways. If you go back in time, even just 10 years, you had about a dozen, actually just fewer jurisdictions using ranked choice voting. But today, you have more than 30 jurisdictions outside of Utah using ranked choice voting. You have 18 jurisdictions in Utah using it. It's been adopted at the state level in multiple states, and it's been used in the presidential primaries, which is relevant to our guest speaker tonight. But in addition to all the national momentum, there's actually been quite a bit of momentum that we have done here in Washington as part of FairVote Washington. And I'd like to invite our executive director, Lisa Aero, to come on camera and talk just a bit about some of the amazing work we've done over the last 4 years and help set up the conversation for where we're going next.
Thank you, Colin. Hello, everybody. My name's Lisa Aero, Executive Director of FairVote Washington, and I wanted to just take just a quick few minutes in case any of you are new to FairVote Washington. Welcome. We're glad you found us. Glad you're here tonight. And even for some of us who've been in the trenches all along, it is a remarkable moment to look back and see where we've come in these last several years. And many of you on this call, I know, have been part of all this progress. So just to start briefly, why is it that Washington State doesn't have cities and towns using ranked choice voting now, as is the case around the country? Well, we've got a state law that prevents that. So that is why we're working on a bill that Colin will be telling you about in just a moment. But that's also why we began this journey with building our volunteer base, of building supporters all around the state. We've got folks all over the state. Every legislative district, every county in the state has ranked choice voting supporters, and we're finding each other through this movement. And it's we have grown much stronger in the last few years, and it's all thanks to efforts of folks on this call right now. We've joined together with other organizations around the state to launch a coalition that's working for ranked choice voting statewide, and that is called the Washington for Equitable Representation Coalition. And Kamau Chege will be telling us a little bit about that, perhaps in a short time. Candidate outreach. We've sent questionnaires to everybody running for for office at any level in Washington state for the last 2 years in a row, building awareness and understanding for candidates running for office and elected officials. And we've reached out to election administrators all over the state. Some of you may not be aware that in Washington state, there are no elections that happen that are run at the state level. Every election that happens in Washington is run at the county level. Our 39 county election administrator teams headed by those county auditors, and then they each have their staff. Those are the folks who make elections happen in our state. We're big fans of their work. We are so fortunate in Washington to have people of real integrity committed to that work. Tough job right now in our nation, but we're behind them all the way, and we've been working with them so that they can understand ranked choice voting and be ready to implement it when the time comes. And just this last month, the King County elections team hosted ranked choice voting workshop for election administrators all over the state. Something on the order of 200 election administrators attended those workshops just last week. Colin, back to you. What are we planning for 2022 and beyond?
So what we're planning is pretty exciting. So first of all, we're going to talk a bit about the legislature. In the legislature, we're working on two pieces of legislation. One is the local options bill. This is the bill that makes it easier and in many cases possible for local jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting. Like you mentioned, Lisa, it's just really difficult right now for Washington jurisdictions, unlike places in California or Colorado or Utah or New York or Maryland, or many, many other states. We have barriers that make it difficult for Washington voters to have the same ability to use ranked choice voting as is used everywhere else. So this bill would allow jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting and just provide a mechanism for doing it so that we make sure if you're using ranked choice voting in Spokane or Clallam County or Seattle, that it's the same version of ranked choice voting. So it builds uniform standards and makes it easier for folks to adopt it. It's, in fact, pretty non-controversial. And we have a tremendous co-sponsor or prime sponsor, Representative Kirsten Harris-Talley, who championed the bill in the 2021 half of the 2-year session, who helped get us all the way to the House floor, where we didn't quite make it to a vote before the cutoff date. But because Washington State's legislature operates on a 2-year biennium, we're going to pick up right where we left off at the beginning of January, ready to go to the House floor, ready to get voted on, and then we're going to go over to the Senate side. Now, the 2022 legislative session is going to be quick. It's only 60 days. So everything will be wrapped up by March, which doesn't give us a lot of time, which is why it's so important that today, and in fact, over the last year, we've been building that list of volunteers, of supporters, and mobilizing our supporters across the state to advocate for ranked choice voting. But we're also not just doing the local options bill. We're also trying to further push the envelope. And the way in which we're doing that is trying to get ranked choice voting adopted for presidential primaries. One of the things that I alluded to earlier is the fact that this has already happened. Hawaii, Wyoming, Alaska, Kansas, and Nevada all used ranked choice voting in the presidential primaries in the year 2020. And the state of Maine said that they will use ranked choice voting for the 2024 presidential primaries. So this is something that we think we should do here in Washington, in particular because of the nature of vote by mail contests, where you have a lot of candidates. For those who are unaware, in Washington state, more than 1 in every 4 ballots went to a candidate who dropped out. So whether it was for Senator Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang, Michael Bloomberg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, at the end of the day, if you voted for these candidates who were still in the running when you got your ballot didn't help anyone get delegates when it came time for election day. But with ranked choice voting, like these other states use, that doesn't have to be a problem, because you can say, I want Andrew Yang, I want Amy Klobuchar, I want Elizabeth Warren to get delegates, But if they can't, or if they drop out, or if something happens over the next 3 weeks, I want my vote to count for someone else instead. This has been a proven success in all of these states, and we think it's time to do so here in Washington as well. So that's it for the legislature, but there's also a bit more that we're going to be doing around the state. So part of it's going to depend on how this legislative session goes in up until March. But we currently are preparing plans to run multiple campaigns around the state to adopt ranked choice voting at the local level. So we need the local options bill to pass if we want to do everything. If we want to pursue our hopes and dreams and push for ranked choice voting in literally every jurisdiction around the state, we do need that local options bill to pass. But there are ways and there are places in which we can advance ranked choice voting at the local level now. And in fact, a lot of that work has actually already been done. At the official Charter Review Commission level, multiple counties across the state are already discussing putting ranked choice voting on the November 2022 ballot. And we want to help start and finish those conversations and start new conversations around the state. And so that's one big thing that we're going to be doing after the legislative session is done. But the end game for us isn't getting a bunch of municipalities and counties around the state to adopt ranked choice voting, although that is one of our big goals. For us, we want to follow in the footsteps of Maine and Alaska and adopt ranked choice voting statewide here in Washington and use it to elect our state legislators, our executive offices like governor, lieutenant governor, commissioner of public lands, and attorney general, and to elect our members of Congress. And so our plan, what we are building for today, right now, is a statewide ballot initiative in concert with a bunch of our partners around the state. And so that's where we're building towards, and that's what is on the agenda for the next 3 years, working in the legislature to advance ranked choice voting and make it easier to adopt, adopting ranked choice voting in local jurisdictions around the state, and winning ranked choice voting at the state level, as has been done in a few other states. So it's a pretty ambitious set of things that we want to do, but we think we can do it based not just off of the success of the movement around the country, but based off of the success we've had right here in Washington state. And to talk a little bit more about some of the work that we've done, we're going to prepare to start closing the polls. So if you haven't voted yet, now is a good chance to go into the link in the chat that Jessica has posted and help us decide on our Animal Mascot Council. Thank you very much, Jessica. But I'd like to hand the microphone virtually over to Kamau Shiga. Kamau is the director of the Washington Community Alliance, formerly the Washington Census Alliance, which is a titan of an organization in Washington state. They are one of the largest umbrella organizations and coalitions of organizations led by and working in communities of color around the state. They have been incredible partners to advocate for the local options bill and ranked choice voting at the state legislature, and they convene the Washington for Equitable Representation Coalition. And that coalition is a large coalition of more than 27 organizations from around the state that are committed to advancing and promoting ranked choice voting and proportional representation. So Kamau, if you could turn your camera on, I'd love to hand the microphone over to you.
Thanks so much, Colin. And I'm so excited we have over 120 people here. My name is Kamau. I lead Washington Community Alliance. And I want to just talk really shortly about the opportunity we have and the resources we need to be able to keep up this movement, especially at a really critical time for our democracy. When I started at Washington, what was then Washington Census Alliance, it was a coalition of tribes and organizations of color that were really dumbfounded and also terrified at how the hyper-partisanship in our country led to something as simple as making sure all people are counted, being made both more politicized and also infused with Islamophobia and anti-immigrant sentiments, and created this coalition. And as we did that work, we saw the year 2020 really clarify the crisis of our democracy. And one of the things I learned, which was a fact that sticks with me all the time, is as dysfunctional as our democracy is right now, where it's very anti-majoritarian, things that most people agree on, solutions agree on, don't get passed, it's going to get much worse. The country becomes majority Black and brown in the 2040s, but our institutions won't actually be able to govern for that multiracial and majority people of color democracy until our institutions, our Senate, our Electoral College, our courts, until our states are themselves, majority of states are majority minority, and that won't happen until the 2090s, which means we're looking at a future where not only is our democracy incredibly dysfunctional, but it will take on a very racist element as well when there's a majority of the country that is Black or brown that's being disenfranchised because we don't have solutions like ranked choice voting, proportional representation. But in order to do that, we need the resources to have that fight. And I'm really excited about the activists and interested people who are on this call. And so I want to ask you to make sure to visit FairVote Washington, which has been really instrumental in advancing the solutions we need to have a true and just and equitable multiracial democracy, and donate what you can, something that's both meaningful to you and will help us meaningfully advance this work, because we have really a short window of time to solve the deep crisis in our democracy. And in order to do that, we need to scale solutions. We need to prove to people that ranked choice voting works, giving people more choices works, having proportional representation works, and it's how we can have a pluralistic multiracial democracy in this country. That's why I'm part of this fight. That's why I care so much about this movement, and anything that you can give to help us make sure we continue this work and give people lived experiences of ranked choice voting and proportional representation will go really far. So I'm excited to have so many like-minded people and people who care about this work here, and would love if you would join me in resourcing this work. I'll pass it back to Lisa, who I get to work with every day, and for you to share more about the next part of our program.
Kamau, thank you so much. Folks, we do have some serious fundraising we need to do here to close out the year strong. You can tell we've been doing a lot, and that does take money to make sure that we have staff who are there able to help all our volunteers. We couldn't be doing this without our volunteer teams, and our volunteers do need our staff members to be solidly there in place to be able to direct all of the activities we're doing. So we have a budget shortfall or a gap to fill, we could say, here between now and the first of the year of about $50,000. And very excited to let you know tonight, you're the first to hear that an anonymous donor has just pledged half of that. So put that up as a challenge match, essentially, for all gifts that come in between now and the end of October. Any gift, any amount. We especially appreciate recurring monthly gifts. Those help us budget. There's a link in the chat tonight. If you are adept at technology and can just hop over, grab your credit card, make a donation tonight, we'd love it. Don't worry though, if you need a little bit more time, you'd like to focus on the webinar tonight, it's okay to follow up right after the show and do that. In fact, donations that we receive between now and noon on Monday will be entered in a drawing for a copy of Andrew Yang's book. You're going to be hearing about that in just a few minutes. He's on a book tour. We've got 3 copies of the book we'll be mailing to folks who donate between now and Monday at noon. And again, remember, all gifts are matched 1-to-1 right now through the end of October. If you've been waiting for just the right time to donate to FairVote Washington, now's the time. We need it, and your gift will be matched. Thank you so much. Back to you, Colin. I think we have an election to look at. Yeah?
We do, yes. So before I show the results of the election, I want to explain very briefly what's happening here today. So you'll notice that we talked about electing our Animal Mascot Council, not just one animal mascot. And that's because at FairVote Washington, generally speaking, we are big proponents of this idea of proportional representation. This is what Kamau was talking about, that not only is majority rule important, but minority representation is important as well. And if a group is 1/3 of the community or 1/3 of the voters, that group should have the power to elect 1/3 of the representatives. And generally speaking, when you're talking about, say, state legislatures or city councils or county commissions, electing multiple people often results in a body that not only reflects the community more accurately, but where more voters helped elect someone to that final office. So that's what we've done here today, is we've elected 3 people, 3 animal mascots, instead of just one, because that way more voters in the FairVote Washington family will have their voices heard and will be able to say that there is a animal on the council that they helped elect. So we're about to close the poll. So if you haven't voted yet, this is your last call. It's there in the chat. I'll give you just 30 seconds or so, and we'll remind you quickly about our candidates because those are who we're voting for. So again, meerkats, who are focused on consensus building, alpacas, who are focused on diversity, giraffes, who are focused on listening to their constituents, coyotes, who are just really adaptable representatives, owls, who are very wise, and slow but dependable and reliable turtles. So I'm actually glad I stalled a little bit because we have had 3 more votes trickle in. So thank you to those who are getting your votes in now. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll walk through what happened with the election. Okay, so we've got 91 votes and 37% of you voted for owls, which is a pretty solid chunk of the voters, more than 1/3 of voters. But remember that we want every 1/3 of voters to elect one of our 3 counselors. So we don't just want to elect an owl, because an owl doesn't represent everyone. Struggling with the math here, 63% of voters wanted someone that wasn't an owl. So what we do here is we also look at these other candidates. 25% here, that's our magic number. Every candidate who can get more than 25% of the vote will end up being elected. So Owl got a little bit more votes than they needed, which is great. And now we're going to do what you do in proportional ranked choice voting, which is those excess votes, more than you needed to get elected, go to those voters' second choices, because every 25% elects one candidate. And it wouldn't be fair to voters who backed a really popular candidate to say that they only get to elect, if 75% of voters wanted Owl, we wouldn't want the other 25% of voters to elect the other 2 animal mascots. That would be nonsense. So what we found is that meerkat is very popular, but a lot of our voters actually also like coyote. So meerkat has now crossed that threshold, which is great, but we're electing a council of 3. And so we don't yet know which of these 3 candidates is supported by, more than 1/3 or just under 1/3 of FairVote Washington voters. So now we do the usual ranked choice voting thing. And Turtle, unfortunately, is not a very popular candidate. So Turtle is going to get eliminated. And or rather, oh, sorry, before Turtle got eliminated, there was a couple excess votes for Meerkat as well, because again, you only get 25%, every 25% of the vote plus one elects one candidate. So now Turtle's going to get eliminated because now Turtle's not a very popular candidate. And Turtle voters seem to be pretty split between Giraffe and Alpaca. Not a lot of love for Coyotes, and that might be because Coyotes are predators. Turtles are not predators. You're kind of seeing some voting blocks emerge here. And so Alpacas, unfortunately, are going to be our next defeated candidate. Just 14% of folks supported them. And Alpaca voters were actually evenly split between Coyotes and Giraffes. And in a razor thin finish, we actually end up with Giraffe ahead. And so those are our 3 members of council. Oh, I didn't mean to hit the finish button. Well, that's okay. We'll go back. And so folks should recognize that ultimately, at the end of the day, we ended up with a animal council here that 74% of voters are happy with. At least 74% of voters got a candidate that they voted for elected. If this was a single winner contest, if we were electing a mayor or a single mascot instead of an animal mascot council, we could have gotten majority support and made sure that 55% of voters were happy. But we'd still have a big chunk of folks who weren't happy. And so by electing multiple animals at once, we're increasing the number of folks who got to vote and win the election of a candidate of their choice. So we're really happy about the election. So let's go back and look at our candidates here. So what we have decided as a group of voters here at FairVote Washington is that we like being wise and making wise choices. We like building consensus because that is very important. We don't want to just steamroll anyone, which is important in particular if you want minority representation. And I actually forget, did I say coyote? No, it was giraffe, because we want to listen to our constituents. So we're going to listen to everybody. We're going to build consensus and try to please as many folks as possible. And we're going to be wise about how we move forward. So those are going to be the 3 core FairVote Washington values for the next year. And that'll be our animal council, which is very exciting. Now we're still a couple minutes away from our guest, Andrew Yang, joining us. And so in the meantime, we can take a couple questions from folks in the chat, if there are any that are highlighted specifically to Washington State. So I see one from Hillary that I can go ahead and answer. Hillary, there's a bunch of amendments proposed for House Bill 1156, the local options bill. And the strategy is basically we've been working closely with the prime sponsor, Representative Kirsten Harris-Talley, to talk about sort of the implications of those amendments and what they mean, whether or not they are supported by standard best practices for ranked choice voting that we've seen around the country. And essentially, there's a bunch of the amendments that are proposed are actually pretty good, or they're friendly amendments, or they don't have big substantive effects. And so a lot of them are actually probably things that are going to strengthen the bill and will give more legislators the ability to say that they help influence the bill and make it stronger. If there's amendments that we think are going to harm the bill or undermine an important part of it, we'll recommend to the representatives to vote against them. But at the end of the day, everything that happens on the House floor is really out of our hands. Everything that we can do is before then and calling all the legislators. So that's how we're going to attempt to deal with those amendments. Did one of my colleagues just unmute to join the call? No, okay.
Hey everyone. Don't know if I'm audible.
Oh, hello. Yes. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Yang. So here's our featured speaker, folks. Andrew, just so you know, we just elected our FairVote Washington Animal Mascot Council using ranked choice voting. For those who are unfamiliar, Andrew Yang is known for his proposal of universal basic income and raising very serious concerns about automation. But for him, these issues are only the beginning of what we need to talk about and address as a society. Andrew Yang believes the machinery of American democracy is failing and that we need bold new ideas to rewire it for 21st century problems. Inspired by his experience running for office and working as an entrepreneur, Andrew Yang works on issues such as data rights, fact-based governance empowered by modern technology, and of course, is a big supporter of ranked choice voting. Everyone, please welcome Andrew Yang.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Look at this. Check it out. I'm on a cityscape. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, someplace that I know quite well because I campaigned here for a number of weeks last year. I'm on my forward book tour. And if you take a look inside the pages of Forward, you know what I recommend as the path out of the mess the country's in? Ranked choice voting. There's really no other way. That I've become such a huge proponent of ranked choice voting as a skeleton key that can help unlock us from the polarization that is dogging us. Ranked choice voting, and I don't need to tell you all this, but ranked choice voting should reward people who can build broad coalitions. It should discourage folks from slagging each other, from extremity, from trying to inflame the passions of a minority while the rest of us look on and think, you know, this might not be the tone or the leadership or the policy that we need. So I want to applaud everyone who's here tonight because you all are ahead of the curve. My new mission in life is to try and get other people to catch up to where you are. I think that what I did for universal basic income over the last several years, we must now do for ranked choice voting. And if you have a big policy in mind, the mechanisms are now more important than ever. We can look up and see that our country is stuck. Polarization is getting worse and worse. All of the incentives are around retreating to your corner and blaming the other side. And the incentives, unfortunately, are the opposite of what we need. Ranked choice voting has the potential to align the incentives of our leaders with most of us, with 51% of us, which would be a very, very dramatic improvement from the 10 to 20% most extreme partisans that right now control essentially 83% of our legislative seats, and apparently the vast majority of our policy, or not policy, as the case may be. So regardless of what party you're for, ranked choice voting is just a modernization, an upgrade, an improvement. And we have to explain it to the people in Washington and the people around the country as quickly as possible so they can see how important this is. It seems wonky. It seems kind of unsexy, like it's the plumbing of democracy. We have to make it sexy. I'm going to try and sex it up. Andrew Yang, sexing up ranked choice voting. We're going to, have some music or whatever else to make it sexy. But really thrilled to be here with you all tonight, and thrilled that so many people are taking on this cause in Washington State. We have our work cut out for us. People don't love new things sometimes. There's some like data resistance, but this is the answer for the country. I'll do everything I can to help, and it's folks like you that are going to do the hard work that are going to lead us in a better direction. So thrilled to be here with you all. Let's go. FairVote Washington, FairVote everywhere. Just so you all know, I actually just joined the board of the FairVote Action Network. I'm not sure if that's public. So I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get to work. And hopefully a lot of the people that support me will do the same. Let's go, Washington. Let's go, FairVote. I'd like to be here.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. I feel like if we were in a live room, we'd get a lot of applause at this point. So we've got a bunch of questions for you. We've had supporters submitting us questions to ask you over the last few days. We've got more than we're going to get to. But selfishly, I'm going to ask you a question first before we get to the ones from our guests. Mr. Yang, you have had the fairly unique experience of running in two highly televised primaries on the national scale with over a dozen candidates in both races. One of those primaries just sort of used plurality rules, and whoever got the most votes ended up winning the contests, and the other used ranked choice voting. Can you talk a bit about, as a candidate, someone interacting with voters and going out on the stage, how did those two experiences differ for you?
The presidential race was a joy. I am the only candidate to have ever won the Iowa youth straw poll and not actually win the caucus. It's good distinction. So only young people voted. But I was also number one in a candidate that Iowans wanted to get a beer with. And so I think that if there had been ranked choice voting in the presidential contests, I would have demonstrated much broader support, because I think I was on a lot of people's theoretical ballots from 1 through 5. So certainly missed ranked choice voting in that environment. And then in the mayoral, one of the jokes I tell is that, I love ranked choice voting because I lost an election that used ranked choice voting, and I still am championing it, where it enabled me to campaign with another candidate, Catherine Garcia, who I saw as the next best choice, which is something you couldn't do in a plurality election. Like, I got along well with some of my fellow candidates in the presidential, but it's not like we could hang out together that much, you know what I mean? But ranked choice voting, you could. It should enable people who are passionate about even an issue that affects only a small number of people from getting that issue included, because you're trying to build a coalition. So between the two of them, I vastly prefer ranked choice voting. And if we'd had ranked choice voting in nominating contests, I think that we'd have better results.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you for sharing about your experience. I've got a question from the audience from Stephen, who asks on something that actually kind of touches on something that you just alluded to. Sometimes adopting an alternative electoral system like ranked choice voting could decrease an elected official's personal chances of re-election if they benefit from vote splitting or running negative races. So even though RCV is a better system, when it doesn't align with the personal motives of a legislator, how do you propose trying to persuade those in charge to adopt RCV anyway, even if it might not help them in their particular contest?
Well, the first thing I try and do is persuade them that it will help them in their contest. And I think there are legitimate arguments you could bring to bear in just about any circumstance, especially if someone's an incumbent, because the fact is the incumbent's going to have the highest name recognition, like a ton of advantages. So I would really dispute the premise. I'd be like, this is totally going to help you. And then after that, it would be to try and extol the virtues of it, which hopefully would have some weight, even if they didn't think it was in their personal interest. But I do think most incumbents could be persuaded that it's going to be good for them, because, someone new comes along. They can't beat you. Everyone loves you. That would be my message.
Yeah.
You're unbeatable. You're the most popular official in all the land. That would be, I would just try prostrate flattery. That's what I would go for.
I think a lot of legislators are subject to that. So I think that's a good piece of advice.
I have noticed that.
Talking about democracy needing to evolve and needing better, newer systems that aren't 300 years old. In your new book, Forward, which was just published, you talk about that very process, the need to update our democracy for the 21st century. Can you talk about some of the key ways that you think our democracy needs to evolve and get with the modern program?
Polarization threatens to tear our country apart and also drive us into the ground where we can't get anything done. The biggest changes I want to see that would help our democracy get back on its feet is a combination of open primaries and ranked choice voting. Because the fact that partisans control so much of the agenda or blocking the agenda is really disastrous. So that's the single biggest thing that I'm after is open primaries and ranked choice voting. You can tell why I'm here tonight. Some of the other things I think will be positive, but I see as very, very secondary or tertiary. I do think term limits would be a positive thing. 75% of Americans agree with that. People shouldn't be going to DC to stay there forever. Hopefully at some point they did what they could and come home. Money in politics is a massive problem. My suggestion is that we give everyone democracy dollars as they've done in Seattle and a couple of other cities. At scale, I was saying $100 for everybody that they could give to any political candidate to try and wash out the corporate money. So those are some of the big things I'd like to see happen. I'd like to see proportional representation in terms of the electoral college. I know some people here are for proportional representation at the district level, which I am very open to, honestly. So those are some of the big things that I'd be into. But to me, it starts with open primaries and ranked choice voting, in part because I think those changes are in some ways more achievable, more direct, because of passionate activists like you all. If enough of us get together, we can get them done.
Speaking of getting the ball rolling and starting where you can have victory, we've got a question from a FairVote Washington supporter not in Washington, David Pizzuto. David says that he's running for local council in his hometown, thanks in large part to you and Humanity Forward. And so he wants to know if you have advice on how to get ranked choice voting conversations starting on that really local micro level to help it gain traction in New Jersey, which is where he lives. And if you think that local towns moving RCV can help with the movement, or do you think that we need to start at the state level to be taken seriously?
Well, most of the RCV implementations are at the local level. So we should definitely try and build on that. Thank you for the kind words. And like maybe Forward Party can get behind you. Just go to the website and submit your info. We're still figuring out, frankly, the political process and the rest of it. But we're going to get behind candidates at the local level. So do go to forwardparty.com. I have a feeling that you're super aligned if we're having this conversation. But RCV at the local level is also, again, more achievable. And the more people are exposed to RCV and use it, then the more comfortable everyone becomes.
Right. Got another question in chat from James, and this is following up on your answer to the question before the last question, saying that you've talked about other European countries that are successful examples of multi-party democracies and why that's important and why that's good. And he asked specifically about proportional representation. Do you think that would be an effective way, if we could win it, to advance a multi-party coalition government?
Yes. The short answer is yes. I mean, I understand how difficult trying to shift to a genuinely multi-party system is going to be in the US, and proportional representation would be a very, very direct way to get there. So I am supportive. I'm not pushing that right now as directly, in part because I think we can unlock a ton of value with open primaries and ranked choice voting. But I'd be for proportional representation for a lot of the same reasons, because it does break up this. I'm calling it bipolar. I guess it is genuinely bipolar, bipolar system,
Yeah.
and would give rise to a different coalition. So you should know that I'm supportive and I understand the math. I do.
Great. You'll have to look at the results of our animal election council later, because we used proportional representation to pick those 3 animals. Got another question for you from Christy. Christy says that she saw a quote from you about how what you saw when running for office was that the power that people get, even when they're just candidates, is something that you can really feel. And that in some ways you felt like you had more power as a candidate in the national spotlight than you did as a CEO. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you think can be done to change the power culture of politics and make things better in that regard?
It's really rough. It's bad. I think it's worse for women and people from groups that, frankly, don't generally have as many role models or opportunities in this space. Hats off to anyone who decides to run for office, because if you run for office, there's something so personal about it. And I compared it to being a CEO, and as a CEO, you're not selling yourself to the same degree as a candidate. It took me a massive adjustment and a learning curve. Like, I stunk for a while. I'm more comfortable pitching something that's not me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm more comfortable pitching UBI or ranked choice voting than, hey, Andrew Yang's gonna fix everything. And I think a lot of the best candidates, unfortunately, are people that would be uncomfortable in this process. I'm gonna have to muse as to how we could fix that. But I think the electoral system has some virtues, but it has some massive, massive drawbacks. And I think that ranked choice voting could help on this line as well. I think, I'm going to give an example. I think women would do better in ranked choice voting because I think a lot of women just seem a lot more sane and reasonable. And then, maybe they're not quite as, combustible or like inflammatory, but, a lot of people will just be like, you know what, I could use a reasonable person. It's another reason I'm a fan of this process change. I think we just end up with many more reasonable leaders, in part because the process stinks, in part because the process of running for office is just, I just admire people who do it. And some people say to me, it's like, oh, you did something harder, you ran for president. And I say running for local office is probably harder because everyone knows who you are and where you live, and it's more personal. And I joke that if Andrew Yang disappears for a couple of days, you just figured I was in New Hampshire. But if you disappear for a couple of days locally, then they're like, why weren't you at my garage sale?
Yeah, funny you should mention that. There's a woman I know who ran for office in Oakland, down in California, and she's a woman of color, and she said that she wouldn't have run if it wasn't ranked choice voting, but that knowing she could try to appeal to her opponent's supporters instead of having to worry about being attacked, that made her feel more safe and able to run for office. So
I have to use that story, but it makes perfect sense to me. It really does.
Interesting. Another question for you. So we've talked a bit about, multi-party democracy is the way to go. But let's say that you're a diehard Democrat, you're a diehard Republican. Valerie has asked, what impact do you think ranked choice voting has on the Democratic and Republican parties? So if you like one of those two parties, why should you support ranked choice voting?
If you like one of those two parties, you should support ranked choice voting because you get better leaders within those parties. I mean, a lot of these processes are just party primaries. So let's say you're a Republican, and I think the Republican Party in Virginia did this. It's like, well, you want to try and get the best leaders to put out there, and just get better leaders this way, even within your party.
Great. That makes a lot of sense to me. Got another question from Karen Austin. And Karen wants to know if you have advice on good practices that are key to mobilize RCV supporters and volunteers. So you've won someone over, they think RCV is a good idea. How do you convince them to dedicate some time to actually help push the campaign?
Oh, you just need to give them something very, very concrete and direct, where it's like, okay, you're into it, great. We're going to be tabling at this event. You want to join me? We're going to be like knocking on doors. You want to join me? Then you have to lead them. Like, people follow other people. People follow other people's examples, and people also really want direction. So you have to give them a place, a time, and activity, and then lean on them, and then ping them, and then drag them. And then if they do it, then they'll be like, oh, one thing I love about this group too is that the people are wonderful. So, if you get this person and then you get a third person, then they'll meet the third person, like, oh, I made a friend. So that's the way it goes. It's like, it really is leading by example and demonstrating your own commitment. I know it's a lot.
I think the fact that we've got over 120 people here on 7 o'clock on a Saturday shows that at least some of the folks here are taking it seriously, which is great. I'd argue all of them.
Oh, I can tell. That's why I'm here too.
Well, thank you. So I guess we've got one last question for you, and if you want, you can answer it and close out however you want, whether it's talking about RCV or an inspiring call to action. I'll defer to you. So this last question comes from Tyler, and he wants to know what you think is the single largest roadblock that's preventing RCV from being more commonplace, and what do we need to do as a movement of thousands of people around Washington State to get around that roadblock?
The single biggest roadblock is people's general skepticism and dubiousness around anything new, particularly when it comes to something that they may value very highly, which is their vote or their election. If you come say, hey, we're going to change this voting system, I think most people's natural conservatism kicks in. Even if they're generally, it's like somewhere in the middle. I think like a lot of people be like, and so it requires first early adopters and then early mainstream. But the resistance, to some extent, it's an education issue. To some extent, it's a confidence issue. If you can get key people that they trust to say, no, this is actually really good, then that's a big win. But we shouldn't have any illusions. Change is generally not easy when it comes to these systems in the US. The US does have some conservatism really baked in. And so that's the roadblock we have to overcome. I'm confident we can do it. So a couple of things I say is that 95% of New Yorkers found it easy to use and 77% want to do it again. And if you can get 4 out of 5 New Yorkers to agree to do something, it's pretty much 100% someplace else, or it's like unanimity. So yeah, but it's going to take us rolling up our sleeves and doing it. I guess I'll shift right to the fun call to action. I'm so thrilled to be here with you all. I am so passionate that what we are working on, this group, is the key to our country's salvation, really. And so if someone's like, a key to our salvation is ranked choice voting, yes, it genuinely is. Because we need better incentives, we need better leaders, we need folks who will align with the public's interest. And you all truly are ahead of the curve. You're the early adopters. My job will be to try and get us more company. I think I can do it. I have a track record of mainstreaming kind of wonky seeming ideas that actually are really important and then bringing them to a lot of people. But, bringing it to a lot of people is secondary to the folks who are doing the work. So thank you for doing the work. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get it done. Let's claim some victories. And then it's going to spread like wildfire. But first we have to claim some victories and push this, push this rock off of its perch. And then the avalanche will start. Yeah. And then we'll know what we did. And everyone will be like, oh, it was so easy, but we'll know it was not easy.
Well, we're happy to have your support. Also, I do have one quick, really softball question for you. I only need a yes or no if you have time, which is, do you think your new book is good? Forward.
Oh, well, thanks for asking. If you want a book that may convert someone to ranked choice voting, I believe my book is it. That was the goal. And I promise you, it's fun, it's readable. The first third is just stories from the presidential trail. Like I was joking with someone that if ranked choice voting is spinach, then I was going to just cover it with so much comfort food that it goes down easy. So please do check out the book if you want something. Try it for yourself, see if you dig it. And then if you're like, you know what, I could really use this on someone else, then pass it around. But let's spread the word. That really was my goal in writing the book. So you got to let me know if it works. But you're not going to be able to know unless you check it out.
I'm glad that that's the case because we are actually giving away 3 copies of your book to random donators tonight who are able to support FairVote Washington. So if that pitch sounds interesting to you, you should donate, and there's a chance you'll get a book. Jessica just pasted the link in chat. Andrew, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We're really excited to have a prominent, fierce advocate. You're not just saying, yeah, I think it's good and moving on. You're fighting for it, which is what we're here trying to do. And I guess I just want to reiterate for folks that, we're serious. We have been at this for 5 years now. We are poised to pass legislation at the state level. We're poised to be on the ballot in local jurisdictions around the state. We have a plan to get passed at the state level in the very near future that we've been working on for a couple of years. And your support helps make that possible. We literally cannot do it without you. And I'll reiterate what Lisa mentioned, that until the end of October, a generous donor has donated anonymously $25,000 to our organization, and will match every dollar that we get until the end of the month. So you can get a book, you can double your money, you can help us win ranked choice voting across the state, and you got to spend an evening with Mr. Andrew Yang. So I hope you'll donate. Thank you for helping us elect our Animal Council. Andrew, would you like to have the final word?
Really, I couldn't have said it any better. What a tremendous deal. Double your money, have a massive impact, build a better future for us all. So bust out those credit cards. Let's make this a victorious campaign. And then we'll remember this night.
We'll have you there.
Hats off to you all. You are the early adopters. You're who are going to make this future what we know it should be for our kids. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Let's go get them.
Take care. Thank you, everyone. So at this point, we encourage you to go online and donate. It's too late to change the outcome of our Animal Council election, but we are always accepting nominations for the next year. So please feel free to DM us on Twitter with your favorite animals that you think should be on the council election next year. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your support. It really does mean the world. I don't exaggerate when I say we could not do it without you. Thank you so much.